Picture this: a country where every single person becomes either a monk or a king. The monk gives up everything: money, ambition, desire, and chases liberation. The king takes everything: power, land, resources, and builds an empire. And somewhere in the middle, there are about 26 million ordinary Australians just trying to pay rent, raise kids, and figure out where they fit in a system that wasn't designed with them in mind. Here's the question nobody wants to ask out loud: what actually happens to a society when the rich disappear? Not the kings, not the monks, the rich. And the answer is going to make you rethink everything you thought you knew about wealth, inequality, and why the people you probably resent the most might actually be the ones holding your world together. Let's start with the philosophy, because this question isn't new. For thousands of years, human civilizations have wrestled with the same tension. Ancient Indian philosophy split society into four roles: the priest, the warrior, the merchant, and the laborer. Every single role was considered essential, not morally equal in the eyes of those systems, but functionally necessary. Remove any one of them and the whole structure collapses. The merchant, the wealthy trader, the capitalist before capitalism had a name, was understood as the engine, not the most spiritually enlightened, not the most powerful, but the one who kept goods moving, kept people employed, and kept the wheels turning. Fast forward to 2026, and we've somehow convinced ourselves that wealth is a moral failing. But here's what the philosophy actually tells us when you read it honestly. Not everyone is built for renunciation. Not everyone can be a saint. The Bhagavad Gita doesn't tell Arjuna to put down his bow and go meditate. It tells him to do his duty, to act, to engage with the world. Because a world where everyone walks away from the game isn't enlightened, it's empty. So if not everyone becomes a monk, and not everyone becomes a king, then who fills the space in between? The rich, and more specifically, the productive rich, the ones who build things. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable, and this is the part most finance content won't touch. Australia right now is sitting on a wealth concentration problem. The top 1% of Australian citizens hold roughly 23% of the nation's total wealth. The top 10% hold close to 50%. And if you're watching this and feeling a flicker of outrage right now, that reaction is completely understandable. But stay with me, because the outrage is only useful if it leads somewhere. Here's what those numbers don't show you. The top 10% of Australian income earners pay approximately 46% of all personal income tax collected in this country. The top 1% alone fund hospitals, roads, schools, and welfare payments that millions of Australians depend on every single day. Remove them from the equation, and the budget doesn't just shrink, it collapses. This isn't an argument for worshiping the wealthy, it's an argument for understanding what they actually do inside a functioning economy. Because here's the mechanism most people miss. Wealth, when it moves, creates jobs. When a rich Australian buys a house, a builder works. When they start a business, 20 people get salaries. When they invest in a company on the ASX, that capital funds expansion, equipment, and wages. The rich are not hoarding gold in a vault somewhere. They are, in the vast majority of cases, circulating capital through an economy in ways that ordinary spending simply cannot replicate at scale. Think about Gina Rinehart. Love her or hate her, the Pilbara mining operations she controls employ tens of thousands of Australians directly and hundreds of thousands indirectly. The royalties paid to the Western Australian government fund public services across the entire state. Her wealth is not sitting still, it is moving through the economy at a scale that no government program could easily replace. Now let's flip it. What happens when the rich leave? This isn't a hypothetical. France tried the wealth tax in the early 2010s. Within 2 years, an estimated 10,000 wealthy French citizens had relocated. The tax raised less revenue than projected because the tax base physically walked out the door. Capital followed them. Jobs followed them. Tax receipts dropped. The policy was quietly scrapped. Portugal went the other way, introduced generous tax breaks for wealthy foreign residents. Capital flooded in. Property values rose, which created its own problems, but employment in high-skilled sectors jumped, and government revenues increased. The relationship between wealth and a functioning economy isn't simple, but it is real. Here in Australia, the conversation is heating up. Negative gearing, capital gains tax discounts, franking credits. Every election cycle, someone floats the idea of targeting these concessions used primarily by wealthier Australians, and every time the debate splits cleanly along lines of fairness versus function. Is it fair that a property investor gets a tax break? That's one question. What happens to housing supply and construction employment if you remove it overnight? That's a completely different question, and both matter. But here's the deeper point that most political conversations miss entirely. The real problem in Australia right now is not that the rich exist, it's that the gap between the top and the middle has grown wide enough that ordinary Australians can no longer see a realistic path to the other side. When the median house price in Sydney sits above $1.2 million and the median income sits around $67,000, the math doesn't just feel broken, it is broken. And when people can't see a path forward, they stop trying, they stop investing, they stop building, and the economy loses something it can never get back through tax policy alone: the ambition and productive energy of its middle class. This is the part the philosophers understood that modern economists sometimes forget. A healthy society doesn't need everyone to be rich. It needs wealth to be accessible. It needs the gap between the monk and the king to have enough rungs in the ladder that ordinary people can actually climb it. The merchants, the traders, the investors, the business owners, they're not just necessary because of the tax they pay. They're necessary because of the belief they represent, that effort can translate into something, that the game is worth playing. The moment ordinary Australians stop believing that, something much more dangerous than inequality takes hold. So what does this mean for you, sitting here in 2026, probably earning somewhere between $60,000 and $150,000 a year, probably feeling like the system is tilted against you, because in many ways it is. It means the answer isn't resentment, it isn't redistribution alone, and it's definitely not waiting for someone else to fix it. The most powerful thing you can do is understand how wealth actually works, and then use that understanding to start building your own. Not to become a king, not to renounce everything and become a monk, but to find your place in the middle and make that place stronger, more resilient, and more free than where you started. Because that's what the philosophy was always pointing at, not the saint at one extreme and the ruler at the other, but the merchant, the person who engages with the world, creates value, and builds something that outlasts them. That's the role most of us are actually here to play, and it's about time we started taking it seriously. If this one made you think, hit the like button and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.